Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is a spectacular sequel with amazing boss fights and ultimately, as you probably heard, it makes you feel like Spider-Man. Too. Sometimes. You see, I love Spider-Man, and I feel quite strongly that I've made that incredibly clear. But I mean, let's face it, how could you not? He's like the most relatable guy who just so happens to have super strength, super intelligence,
my weakness, it's small knives,
speed, endurance, the best quips in the game.
You want a trial separation already? I understand, but I'm hurt.
You see? Hashtag that's my relatable Spider-Man, which is why I'm hoping Insomniac can push through these 3 major problems and teensy tiny 4th problem, blocking the game from being the masterpiece that I think it should have been. And we're gonna start with the only thing this suit technically can't and or won't do.
Break out the new toys!
Let's get 2 things straight. First, my suit can't do that. Second, the traversal is the single greatest part of this game. It's low-key goated, as the kids say. Sheesh. Because web swinging around New York as 2 different Spider-Men feels fantastic. Slingshotting from one part of the city to the other feels incredible. And the web wings. Oh my god, the web wings.
Now you listen to me, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar.
Hi everyone, I'm Brian Intihar.
First, you finish this video, okay? And then you drive down to your local bank and you pay the web wings dev everything you got. Because I mean, look at this.
I'm not gonna change your mind. I completely agree with you.
So, I know what you're thinking. If traversal's so good, then what is it doing as one of the major problems? Shocker, right? Well, that's where you're wrong. This is Shocker. That's Spider-Man. Thankfully, I've spent months designing a super scientific tool for detecting the quality of Spider-Manning that I call the Spider Philometer. And yes, we're workshopping the name. Now, we can clearly see that traversal is deservedly off the charts.
Seriously, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar, you better write the fattest check, or otherwise I swear to...
But the others, well, not so much. In fact, they're so low that when you transition to something that really makes you feel like Spider-Man 2, to something like this, it feels incredibly jarring. See, by the time you reach these other problems, they immediately remind you, no, you're not actually Spider-Man. You're just sad and alone, sitting on your couch playing video games until 4 in the morning, and unsurprisingly, it hurts. Now, I could sit here and tell you about the amazing technical feats the team at Insomniac have done to seamlessly stream in the city with a more realistic detail and denser amount of traffic on the PlayStation 5 to make moving through New York feel as fast and as effortless as possible. But we gotta talk about the second problem and the only thing this suit can and or will do on command. Yeah. We're talking about the kachacking. You know, from the last video. You kachaks, you guys. Kachaks. Kachak. I'm a grown man in an overly tight Spider-Man suit. Editor, dear God, please make this look cool.
You serious?
Okay, so in Marvel's Sorry, just give me... So in Marvel's Spider-Man... just give me...
Okay, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar, okay? I'm gonna need you to still finish the video, okay? You finish the video, but then you drive back to your local bank and you take out a second loan, okay? In the condition you give it to the Kachak devs, okay? Because I don't know who hurt them, but they need to be stopped.
Dude! Okay, you know what? Let's just back this up. You see, in this game, there are 4 buttons you'll be spamming the ever-loving Goose out of, depending on the situation. When you're presented with this, you press L1 to parry. When you're presented with this, you press circle to dodge. When you're presented with this, you press triangle to zip to and/or pull enemies with your web. And when you're presented with this, well, you press square for what feels like a very
long time.
Now, to be fair, Miles and Peter are packing some new powers that are incredibly fun to use. They're all great, except for these disgusting legs. And I'm just gonna say what every Spider-Man fan has had bottled up inside of them for years. The Iron Spider legs are lame. They've always been lame and go completely against the character, because when you can build something like this, then I cannot fathom how you would be poor. Make it make sense. The animations look beautiful, and when they're pulled off with finishers like this, they're beautiful. And yeah, they really make you feel like Spider-Man, too. But that's not what you see most of the time.
Is it Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar? Now stop hiding, you decadent steed, and show them what you really see, okay? Show them.
Wow. Riveting. So, let's refer back to the super scientific and never wrong spider philometer, where we can clearly see that going from seamlessly swinging across New York at record speeds and then slamming down into a crowd of thugs from the sky without so much of a scratch to do this to Bob the bad guy? And Bob still gets up?
Bob?
Well, there seems to be a disconnect between me and old Bob here. So please join me in thanking Bob in the comments for being the single greatest threat to humanity. We thank you for your service, Bob, you walking pile of garbage. You see, while the combat feels largely neglected and the most video gamey of the problems, the stealth gameplay, which is more akin to what most of us think of when we think of Spider-Man, and my personal favorite from the previous Spider-Man games, has been completely neutered. There's less gadgets, less options, and if you mess up, well, an entire army of Bobs appears out of nowhere, fully kitted to the gills, with Humvees, warships, and multiple animal-based drones, which, real quick, why is that a thing, in one of America's most popular cities with, you guessed it, 0 repercussions. Okay? Make it make sense. To make it make sense. But you know what doesn't make sense? Subscribing to a non-Canadian coffee company over a hardworking Canadian goose man with the single goal of making Canada's greatest content. So subscribe to help me help Canada from the sad nightmare that it is right now. I love you. But that's a whole other story. Get it? Because that's the next problem. The story's the next problem. Editor, you'll make that look cool, right?
Please. Save my boy.
5 minutes later.
Pulse is weak. We gotta move.
What have you done? What have you done to him?
Okay, now look, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar, I love you, and yeah, you got a strong jawline that you should be proud of. But more importantly, I've prepared a tiny, almost comical-sized briefcase filled with less valuable Canadian money to give to you in exchange for one thing. So first, I'm gonna need you to finish this video, okay, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar? You gotta finish it. Then, you give this to the story devs in exchange for a quick chat, because they lost me on a few things.
Now look, when it comes to stories in video games, well, the bar has been generally set pretty low, sometimes even laughable. Like, if we compared the story quality of movies or TV shows with games, the difference would be substantial.
8, 7, 6, 5,
But luckily for you, I can just tell you that the secret to a good story all stems down to a single thing: change. No, really, it's that simple. Look, let's take Breaking Bad, one of the greatest TV shows of all time.
God right.
Literally, everyone changes, either through minor changes or story arcs sprinkled about multiple seasons. Yet in Marvel's Spider-Man 2, that's not the case.
Hey, you'll come up with something. You always do.
In fact, with the exception of Miles, Tombstone, and Martin Lee,
You're just gonna let me die.
no one really changes at all. Shocker, right? Wrong again. Shocker dies off screen. Try to keep up, okay? You see, Miles has to move on from the death of his father by accepting help from his father's killer.
I won't forgive you. But I can't carry this hate for you anymore, man.
Martin Lee has to reconcile with the idea that he can never be forgiven for the crimes of his past, so he forgoes his power to help Peter go what looks like Super Saiyan regardless of acceptance.
Spider-Man, wake up!
And Tombstone, while showing up briefly, tells us he's changed from a life of crime to probably the chillest guy in New York.
See you around, Spider.
Seriously, that Tombstone stuff? Mwah! Each of these characters change, but the rest of these incredibly important characters have little to no change and barely any impact on the overall story. They just kind of exist as a conduit to push the Venom plot. Peter is Peter, basically apologizes for existing the entire game.
Sorry.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry, Lonnie. I really do want to help you. Sorry we're late.
I'm sorry. Sorry I wasn't here to help. Sorry. Miles, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Miles, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Don't be sorry. Move.
And then technically retires at the end, but I mean, come on.
Come on, buddy.
Mary Jane is a journalist looking to report on serious stories, and now she's a podcaster.
And you're listening to The New Normal.
Harry is sick, and then Harry is sicker.
There are traces of brain activity, but his chances of coming back are very slim.
But the biggest and most frustrating character that goes through absolutely no change, and this is gonna shock you, but stick with me, is the city of New York. Look, here's everything that happens to the city in the span of what feels like a couple days. Sandman destroys a third of the city for some reason. Venom destroys New York's biggest tourist attraction, Times Square. There are multiple Kraven attacks from his hilariously fully kitted international army, including weird bird and tiger-shaped drones patrolling the city. A giant lizard wreaks havoc on a good chunk of downtown and the sewer system, and a frickin' symbiote invasion plaguing the entire city with the intention to take over the entire planet happens. Well, that seems like a little much, doesn't it? How do we handle that?
Now we have these big moments where you can see, like, whether it's a boss or not, these big epic moments, you see the aftermath.
Yes, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar is technically correct. There are physical changes to the city, like the sand left over from Sandman, the shipwrecked transport ship, and broken pier, but they don't matter, especially when these guys are perfectly chill about it. So y'all cool with the whole city being destroyed every day this week, right? I mean, y'all still driving to work, so I guess it doesn't bother you too much, which is a completely different vibe from these guys.
You mess with one of us, you mess with all of us!
Look, it'd be like when Aunt May is dying in the first game, Peter immediately walks away to give the antidote she needs to the city instead, and as a reward you get a trophy and an Aunt May themed costume. Sure, it amounts up to the same thing in the end, but you'd feel incredibly robbed because it isn't the aftermath that matters. It's the character's struggle with himself that causes him to change that does. Although that costume does sound interesting now, doesn't it? Sure, these set pieces look cool until you start to think about them in the context of the story. Just what is Sandman's goal here? How is there that much sand in the city? How did Kraven bring an entire military-grade army from one country to the next and just patrol the street with military Humvees and warships and again, animal-themed drones with zero repercussions? Seriously, what's with the animal-themed drones? Why would you build a bird or tiger drone instead of like a normal one? Isn't that way more complex to build? Also, for a guy who's obsessed with the hunt, isn't it kind of lame to have most of your crew do most of the actual hunting with the highest military tech imaginable? I mean, that seems kind of lame.
Pathetic.
I feel like it would have made a lot more sense to have Kraven surprise you in the open world as you play and, you know, actually hunt you.
I asked for an equal. And this is what you find.
I mean, in any of these examples, the world needs to react because it's just like too large to ignore. Because in this game, we get confirmation of the Avengers, Doctor Strange, Daredevil, and yeah, the entire US military. Sure, it's a video game, but when something like this happens, yeah, I'm feeling pretty confident that the situation has escalated from friendly neighborhood Spider-Man to friendly neighborhood nuke.
8, 7.
But what's worse is all these moments are incredibly surface level in a way the previous games weren't. You see, in those games, it was about change in the characters.
You knew?
AKA a good story. In Marvel's Spider-Man, it was about the change of Otto Octavius and his relationship with Peter.
You are everything I wanted to be!
In Spider-Man Miles Morales, it was about the change of Miles taking on the responsibility of being Spider-Man and the difficult choices he'd have to make regardless of who was on the other side. Now look, it's a superhero game where you kitschak 1,000 bobs at the end of the day. I get it, and we thank you for your service, Bob, you walking pile of invincible garbage.
God, come here, you.
It's not supposed to be realistic, but that doesn't mean it's not trying to have a great story. Except by shoehorning these set pieces in, the story feels rushed and half-baked. It feels like the set pieces were the first things designed, and then they just tried to make plot happen. I mean, after the game's complete, no one cares about Sandman, Lizard, or Kraven. Heck, as soon as Venom is introduced, no one cares about Kraven. The main antagonist before Venom, just no one cares. He's just gone and sure, I guess. So, we went from two incredible Spider-Man stories that changed the characters and the people around them, to a game about two incredible Spider-Men who barely change anything after some of the biggest world and life events ever known occurred.
We're going to heal everyone.
I mean, what's next? Do they all just like sit around the table Fast and the Furious style at the end with a plate full of pancakes talking about family?
Yum, I'll take those.
Well, dang, they really just did exactly that, didn't they? Also, real quick, why did they look so weird? For example, look how amazing this looks on PS4.
I saw you as a son.
Then Peter gets a facelift.
Hello?
And yes, it's slightly distracting for those of us who finished the game with Tom McGarfield's face. But then, despite being on next generation hardware, it somehow gets worse. Now, I know both Insomniac and the incredibly talented voice actor behind Peter want us to get over the face change.
Get over it.
But it consistently took me out the scene. It feels like an insane regression given the new horsepower of the PS5. In fact, Mary Jane, Rio, Haley, and Genki all pulled me out the scenes they were in. They just kind of look like puppets with dead eyes. They scare me. Which makes no sense when Insomniac can do faces like these.
How the hell are you?
Or these.
I feel very close to you right now.
Well, maybe not those. At the end of the day, when we look at all of these problems, it really makes you wonder what another year or two would have done for the game. Without even looking at the data, it was clear that this was going to be one of the most hyped games in years, and it was going to sell regardless of quality. Just putting Venom in the marketing is like catnip to Spider-Man fans. Just look at Spider-Man 3.
See you, chump. What the hell?
But remember,
With great power comes great responsibility.
now don't get me wrong, let's give credit where credit is due. The music by John Paisano makes you want to buy him multiple Paisanos. The performances of the cast are generally fantastic.
This is all my fault. I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
And even the side quests this time around have a lot of fun stuff behind them. But But when the game is guaranteed to be a financial hit regardless of the release date,
Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is enjoying huge success, becoming the fastest-selling PlayStation Studios game over a single-day period.
then this stuff really doesn't feel that forgivable. Because even though each part of the Spider-Feelometer has some merit, it falls just under expectations when the difference between them is so stark. It's as if you ordered a beautiful, freshly baked croissant paired with a vanilla latte and a delicious hazelnut spread for breakfast. But when you receive said beautiful, freshly baked croissant from a highly reviewed establishment that has been hyped to oblivion from everyone in town, and then it's actually paired with a Monster Energy drink and Vegemite, well, either is technically bad, but together they form what I can only describe as a cry for help. You see, when we think of Spider-Man, it isn't about set pieces or fighting world-ending events. It's not about how many ridiculous combos Bob the bad guy can take, even though we once again thank him for his highly annoying service. It's not about the crazy gadgets or amazing costumes. Mostly amazing, I guess. Seriously, what was going on with this? Where'd this come from? There's no comment on it. It just kind of appears. But we all have thoughts. We all have thoughts on the suit. You can't tell me Peter's not looking at that suit and going, what? And no, it's not even about the teeny tiny fourth problem we've still yet to talk about. Spider-Man is about real people fighting real problems with real consequences that force the character to make difficult choices that only they can. Insomniac, you've done a fantastic job, and I look forward to Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar paying you with overly sized goofy checks.
Because we've been working really hard to deliver that.
But Sony, you should have waited until this was the Spider-Man game it was always meant to be. And yeah, you won't know when it's going to be perfect, but that's the point.
I hate to leave the thing.
Thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. These last few months have been absolutely insane. You guys are so awesome, and I seriously cannot thank you guys enough. So as always, keep it cute. Oh, and one more thing.
How are there still no Jordans in the game, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar? You drive back to the bank, you get the fattest, thickest check you can possibly get, and you give it to Nike, okay? Because we all know checks over stripes, Spider-Man creative director Brian Intihar. Checks over stripes.